Okay, I've got two geometric series here. The top one has first term 3, so a equals 3, and r equals 2, that's the common ratio, and so every time we're multiplying by 2. Now notice that I haven't put a last term here. Both of these series are going to be infinite series, they've got an infinite number of terms. Now if you were to add up this top series, 3 plus 6 plus 12 plus 24, all the way up to infinity, clearly that will give something really big. It will give an infinitely big answer. However, if we look at this geometric series at the bottom, 4, 2, 1, 0.5, it's still a geometric series. We've got a first term 4, so a equals 4, r equals a half, or 0.5, so that's what we're timesing by, so it gets smaller as we go along. And if you add up all of these, it doesn't tend to infinity. So picture-wise, I've drawn a picture here. So the first term was 4. Well, that term there, 4, I've drawn it as 4 squares. The next term was 2, I've drawn that as 2 squares, and then an extra square, and then an extra half a square, and an extra quarter of a square, and so on. As I keep going, even if I add an infinite number of terms, it's just going to fill in this tiny bit over here. Overall, the number of squares that we have filled in should be 8. That's what we're expecting here. Now, we have a formula to work out these. These only tend to a particular number when the value of r, so what you're timesing by each time, like on this one, is somewhere between -1 and 1. So if the terms are getting smaller as they go along, so anywhere between -1 and 1, then it will tend to some nice number. If we look at the formulas that we had before, this one at the top here, that was the sum of n terms. Well, we can adapt it. If r is somewhere between -1 and 1, then the sum to infinity, an infinite number of terms, so just written the infinity symbol there, an Ouroboros, it's like we get most of this bit up here, but this bracket just tends to 1, because if r is something really small, then r to the n is basically 0. So this whole bracket just tends to being 1. And so we get this thing. Again, you get given this in your formula book, you don't have to remember it, but this is the formula we're going to be using if r is somewhere between these. And this gives us what they tend towards. So let's have a go at it with this one here. We know that we want the answer to be 8 because we can see it's tending to 8 squares. Well, popping the numbers into a formula here, a was 4, that's the first term, r was a half, or 0.5, and putting it into the formula, a goes up here, r goes at the bottom, and we can type all of this into our calculator. It's actually easy enough to do by hand because you're just taking it away from 1 and then doing 4 divided by a fraction. Remember that if you're doing a number divided by a fraction, you can think of this as 4 divided by a half, and then you can keep change flip. So 4, that's the same as 4 times the reciprocal of that 2, which is 8. Or just stick it in your calculator. Right, I've got 2 questions for you to have a go at, an easier one and a harder one. So for each of these, work them out, pause the video, have a go. Just move that. Okay, so for this top one, it's just identifying a and r. So a is 5 and r is a third. Probably prefer the fraction on this one. So a is 5, r is a third, stick it into the formula. You should get out 15 over 2 or 7.5. Again, it's a calculated job. On this next one, we got told what a is. It's 6. And we got told the sum to infinity is 4. We're going to have to do a bit of work to work out r. So let's write down what we know. We know a is 6, and we know the sum to infinity is 4, but we know what the formula for that is, and we know what a is. That's 6. Popping the numbers in here, we've got 4 equals 6 over 1 minus r. Bit of rearrangement here. The thing we're trying to find is on the bottom, so let's multiply up by it. Multiplying up by that as a bracket, we're going to get 4 multiplied by this equals 6. You can either expand out the bracket or divide by 4 at this point. Whichever way you do it, you should get r equals negative a half. Once you've got r and you've got a, you can work out the first 3 terms. So the first term is just what a is 6. The next term is a times r, so it's 6 times minus a half, which is minus 3. And the next term is a times r squared. Well, r squared, negative a half times negative a half is positive a quarter. Times by 6, we get 3 over 2. And we're done. Right, exercise 3e, have a go.